Hello, I'm Lottie.
So am I. No, I'm Alexis.
And we are the developers of Cultist Simulator. And we are together Weather Factory. And please, buy our game. You can found a cult. It's fun.
Hello guys and welcome back. Welcome back to another show. Yes guys, it is me, Bamm Havoc, joined swiftly by Draconis. And we have some special guests for you guys this week as well. The devs of Cultist Simulator. Drac, say hi.
Hello, hello. And welcome to Lottie and Alexis.
Hello.
Hello.
Wait, hang on. Wait, Drac, did you actually just give a normal hello for once?
I gotta keep you on your toes.
Yeah, you really did. Lottie, Alexis, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. We have got a myriad of questions for you guys today, and I have some as well, the personal ones, because I have played about 11, 12 hours of your game, as per Steam, and I have got some very interesting, intriguing insights for you folks. So let's get started. Drac, fire away.
I'll tell you what, let's start out with the background type questions, and why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you got into game development, and how you guys started up the studio.
So, back 10 years ago, I was a software developer who was seized by the desire to make text-based games. And I went on sabbatical for my day job and built in the spare bedroom a game called Fallen in London, which was a kind of a throwaway experimental project that I didn't expect to run for more than a year. And I asked an acquaintance of mine, Paul Arendt, to do the art for it. And I said, I don't think we'll ever make any money, but I'll pay you out the profits if we do. And I founded Fail Better. Paul was my co-founder. 10 years later, Fallen in London is still running. But 3 years ago, 7 years into founding it, we'd made Fallen in London, we'd made Sunless Sea, we'd done a bunch of other work for people like Random House and BioWare and the BBC. And the company had grown to about 18 people, and I just got fed up with managing 2 layers of people. I wanted to do what I got into the biz in the first place for, which is writing and design. So I said, you know what, folks, I'm going to sell my majority stake in the company to the company because business is weird. And I went off on a kind of a Ronin year, walking the earth, working for BioWare, Paradox, Telltale. And then I founded Weather Factory. But to rewind a bit...
Yeah, you see, I should never let Alexis speak before me on this question. I have a much less grandiose way in. I basically did English Lit at uni, which was great, and then got out and thought, hang on, actually I need to get a job. And Lit is wonderful and everything, but it basically means you are either a teacher or on the dole. And I didn't really fancy either of those things. So I essentially emailed every single London indie studio and said, hey, do you want a totally inexperienced person to do something for your team? And astonishingly, one of them said yes, which was an advert game studio, which was its own interesting experience. But then I joined Fail Better, where I met Alexis, and again worked on Fallen in London, Sunless Sea, Submariner, Skies, before leaving to co-found Weather Factory with him now. And as you guys know, because you played it, we released a game last year, our first game, called Cultist Simulator, which is all about founding a cult.
The names Fail Better and Weather Factory, I'm a little curious. Fail Better, to me, makes sense because, you're thinking about playing a game that maybe you're not too good at. A lot, especially things like roguelite games where you're failing over and over again, but maybe getting a little bit further in. Where did you come up with the inspiration for the name of Weather Factory?
So to rewind to Fail Better, first of all, it's actually a Samuel Beckett quote. Ever tried, ever failed, try again, fail better. And it is because, when you're playing games, you often do badly and start over. But the main reason was that you learn by making mistakes. And from the start, as a studio, I wanted to encode in our DNA the idea that we would make mistakes, that we'd learn from them, and that we'd get better at it, which, given the number of fuck-ups I made over the years, was pretty appropriate, as it turned out. But Weather Factory, primarily, it sounded cool. We wanted this to be an experimental studio. We wanted to try to do things that shouldn't work, but did. And Cultist Simulator, this preposterously difficult occult solitaire, is exactly that kind of thing. We wanted lo-fi narrative indie experiments. And Weather Factory, I wanted something encapsulated, something unpredictable, coming out of something predictable.
So you guys established Weather Factory in 2017, and how long, how many months was it before? Because 2018, I know you guys released the game. I think it was in May, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a complicated one. We actually co-founded in December of 2017, but Weather Factory as an entity had kind of existed since AK left Fairbetter, because he is essentially an overachiever who can't relax ever, so immediately left Fairbetter and founded this whole new company.
I really meant to take a month off.
And yet. But yeah, so Cultist Simulator as a concept was burning in AK's mind while he was working for BioWare, Paradox and Telltale, but it wasn't until we ran a successful Kickstarter in September 2017 when we actually started full-time on Cultist, and I left Fairbetter and joined in December, which was when the whole thing kind of actually became, this is now a machine for developing Cultist Simulator rather than a project that's going to happen in the future. So the whole project, I think, took 11 months in all, and that was actually a really key part of the design pillar. We wanted to get a game out as quickly as possible, bearing in mind that it was experimental, so we had no idea if anyone wanted to play it, and bearing in mind that we didn't have a game out there yet. We were a new studio, so no one knew who we were, which is a very dangerous position to be in as an indie.
And those 11 months, some of them were before I started working with BioWare, and I put together a prototype with Martin Nerokar, which ended up being the prototype we shared on the Kickstarter. But so we hit the ground running off the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter was in September, and the game released the following May.
Fair enough. I've got a question for Lottie. I've done some research on the pair of you, and I just want to know of one little tidbit that I actually found quite interesting was games consultant for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. What? Games consultant for what?
So this keeps coming back to haunt me. I can't say that much because the Foreign Office literally sits next to MI6, which have assassins as far as I'm aware. But essentially, governments are not very cool. And certainly the British government is really not very cool. I think it's probably at its least cool period in all my living memory right now, but let's not get into that. They recognised that games were kind of cool, and the youth, which is very important to governments, the youth played these games. So they thought, how can we get people excited about government work and specifically Foreign Office work? Let's consider making a game. So they spoke to me, and I'm sure a few other people, about kind of what was involved in making a game, because people who don't make games don't have any real idea about what goes into it, which is part of the reason that we like talking about it so much, because I do think people find it interesting. But yeah, the Foreign Office approached me and said, we want to make a game that talks about the experience of being an official abroad, and it gives insight in a fun way into the roles and the responsibilities you might have abroad, to break down the idea that it's all men in tailcoats eating Ferrero Rocher, which I thought sounded really fun, but fine. And they talked a bit about what they could do, and usually for the Foreign Office they were really kind of open to having some fun and pointing some fun at themselves. And then of course they had to show it to some guy behind a big oak desk with a big clock on a mantelpiece that ticks really deliberately loudly on, surrounded by 18th century oil paintings. And he inevitably said no. So that never really went anywhere. But the Foreign Office were considering releasing a pretty cool game.
And see, here I thought that story was going to end with, and here we are with Cultist Simulator. So you guys mentioned the Kickstarter, and I understand that went really well. Can you talk a little bit about the process for that? Maybe any advice you have for other indie devs that are looking at starting their or kicking up their own Kickstarter?
So it did. It went better than I expected. We asked for 30k funding, which was what I needed to pay my freelancers. And we ended up raising 82k, I think, almost 5,000 backers. Advice for Kickstarter. So first of all, the advice piece 0, which is unfortunately really hard to do, is start with a rep. So I'd been making games for 7 years.
Great.
And I'd
be Alexis.
Well, be somebody with a story, right? I would expect after the Activision layouts, we're going to see a lot of really good Kickstarters in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And people who say, I worked on this project, and the devs of Diablo or StarCraft or whatever are now doing Kickstarter. But if you have some sort of pedigree, then you've got a hope in hell of getting a press shots. And that's advice piece 0. Advice piece 1 is much more practical, and that is mail Anya at kickstarter.com. That's ANYA. And Anya is the head of games at Kickstarter.
And we should say we do have her permission to hand out her email. We're not just like being outrageous, illegal GDPR people here.
Give them a heads up about what game you're playing, and they might say, "Cool, thanks, cool story."
Go away.
or they might say, "Yeah, that sounds great. We'll make it a staff pick." But give them an idea of what you're planning. Ask them for advice, because the thing about Kickstarter, they really want projects to succeed. They get their fees out of successful projects. They don't get any money out of unsuccessful projects. So they can only give so much attention to each project, but they want the projects to succeed. Reach out to them in advance and ask for help. So that's thing one. Thing two, for fuck's sake, do not announce the Kickstarter on the day. The moment you know you're running a Kickstarter, start telling people about it. Put it in your social medias, put it in your Twitters, tell your family, tell your friends. Enjoy the mockery of your parents of you saying, "Oh, I see you're trying to make a game with that begging site." And then try to get people talking about it as soon as possible. What you want is on the day when you hit the button on the Kickstarter, you want people to be placing pledges the moment they can, the moment it's possible. And the third piece of advice I've stolen from Tom Biddow, who's one of the founders of ICO Partners, the games consultancy, does lots of Kickstarter advice. Tom says, and I think he's absolutely right, people back Kickstarters because of love. A game that some people love and some people hate. A project that some people think is really cool and some people think is lame as all fuck is much, much better than a game that everybody likes. You want to give people a story, so choose something divisive and interesting over something bland and likable.
That's interesting. Yeah, you don't want to blend into the crowd, so to speak. Can you each talk a little bit about what roles you fill within the company and what you did on Cultist Simulator?
Sure. So we split quite neatly down the middle, fortunately. I'm a producer by trade, so I looked after the production. I did a bit of the art as well, and I handled the marketing. And Alexis?
I did the writing and the design and the coding. Not all the coding. Martin Nurokar, who's a UI specialist from Germany, did a lot of really valuable work at the beginning of Cultist, a lot of really valuable work at the end. And we've got a freelancer in now who does some other bits of coding.
So the way that the company essentially works is it's just us two. It's a super micro studio. We deliberately wanted it that way so we could do something experimental. And if it went disastrously wrong, we didn't have to lay anybody off. It would just be us thinking, "Oh, shucks, that didn't work." But we obviously have a bunch of very talented freelancers we rely on to fill all the gaps in our own skill set.
I think it's worth saying as well, if you're starting a studio, it's tempting, if you're stupid like me, when I founded Fail Better, to look for people who have the same skill set as you. So the first person I hired, Paul Arend, was an artist, and I can't draw, so that was really important. But he was also a writer, a very erudite one. And then the next 5 people I hired were all either writers or coders. No marketing people, no producers. And so I ended up doing all that stuff myself and having to kind of make do. So it's very easy to think the things that you're interested in are the things that are important. And of course, you don't want that. You want to found with or hire people of complementary skills.
So whereabouts are you guys based?
London.
Well, believe it or not, myself and G will be in London attending EGX. Are you guys going to be there?
Yeah, we'll be there.
I think we will.
We're on a panel, aren't we?
Possibly. I think we're waiting to find out. But yeah, Rest is great. We'll see you there.
Happy days. I'll see you guys there. I'll shake your hands, give you some beer, and maybe have a bacon signing with you too.
Woo!
Right. Now the loaded question, right? What was the inspiration for this game? Now, I know it's a loaded topic, and I'm keen to know what the answer is for each of you guys individually.
So here's one thing. Cult in Britain means something different than it does in America. And we didn't really get this until halfway through the Kickstarter. So in Britain, you hear cult, you think the Golden Dawn in the late 19th century. You think Lovecraft, you think secret occult orders. You know, you say this to an American, often they think guns and FBI raids and sex slavery. And obviously the two are not disconnected, you know, but it's totally difference of emphasis. And Cultist Simulator came out in the same time frame that Far Cry 5 came out. And the treatment of cults in Far Cry 5 is very, very different. So for me, Lottie's pointed out that often the games that an indie studio makes are very interesting insights into their psyche. When we made Sunless Sea, Fail Better was running out of money, time, and hope. And so Sunless Sea is this game about crossing a great dark ocean with a fragile cargo and limited supplies. When I made Cultist Simulator, among other things, it's a game about balancing the domestic demands of work and life with the demands of trying to find something finer and more interesting or more terrifying underneath the skin of the world. And if you're talking about the life of an indie dev who spends half the time doing guest writing work for big studios and half their time working on a crazy dream project,
And has a kid.
then that's a lot of it. So that was genuinely part of the inspiration was trying to balance art and reality. And the other side of it, there are a bunch of formal experimental ideas I had about trying to do minimalist work and trying to get a crafting game that was also a narrative game. But also I like making games where you get to do the things you don't normally do in games.
Yeah.
So in Cultist, you're playing essentially the antagonist from a lot of stories or the people have read, or what are the games that people are playing. And I wanted to switch things around and show, why somebody actually might want to conduct acts of dubious morality and what the allure is.
And that leads into probably my favourite thing about the original design pillars. I think the kindest thing someone has ever said to me about Cultist Simulator was that Cultist is the only game that they have ever played which gives them a true Lovecraftian experience. And that's one of the things we set out to do right from the start. The term Lovecraftian is used a lot. And a lot of the games, I think, have been found to be a bit disappointing by people playing them, mostly because Lovecraft was a really great writer who really found his niche and was exceptionally good at making you really afraid of like the peripheral horrors and the stars and the slippery, boneless thing that you can't quite, forget having heard one dark night. And it really gets under your skin. But the moment you put that in a game, all the goalposts shift. How do you actually display Cthulhu on screen and make him as terrifying as this constant suggestion that there's this mad squid-faced god in the depths who's going to come out at some point and destroy humanity? Like, that's much more frightening than Squidface. So Cultist took what we talk about as an apophenic design approach, which basically left a lot of the spaces that Lovecraft leaves for the players to kind of project their own fears onto, which means that I think Cultist does let people feel like there are things in the peripheral, in their peripheral vision, and all of the kind of horrible squirming monstrosities are there, but we don't have to show them or talk about them really brazenly. We can just let the ambience slip into their bones and freak them out.
Yeah, if you let the players cooperate with you in building the experience, and the experience belongs to the players as well.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like pretty high praise, and the way that you describe the game too, in that respect, it sounds a lot like the way someone would describe a typical tabletop RPG with collaborative storytelling.
Well, I'm actually a massive nerd. Of course I am, because I work in games. But I used to write and play a lot of Call of Cthulhu, which was my go-to. But AK, you actually have more impressive TT.
I wouldn't say impressive. I mean,
yeah, well, you wrote your own.
Well, yeah. So I played TTRPGs for like 20, 30 years.
Right?
But 8 years old. I was literally sitting behind like two kids in a swimming pool viewing gallery, and they were talking about hit points, and they had this book with a blue dragon on the cover, and that was when the bug got me, and I went home that night and tried to get my brother to play D&D with him with the homebrew rule set, and he said
he was too cool.
No, yeah, he was too cool. But I stopped running tabletop role-playing games specifically because I realised that I wanted to do something creative as my day job, and if I was doing something in the evenings, then I would always get my creative jollies doing that, so it never happened. So I laid down my GM screen 11 years ago, and I never picked it up again because now I guess I GM for a very large number of people in a sort of less direct way rather than a very small number of people in a more direct way, and I still miss it. But yeah, there's a lot of that TTRPG sensibility in. There wasn't Fail Better. Some of the other folks there were TTRPG enthusiasts, and a lot of that sensibility is carried over into Weather Factory as well.
Cue Drac with his D&D stories.
No, that's all right, dude.
Well, I've got some questions about the actual game itself. Where did you find the names for these particular orders? I mean, the Unflinching Order, Society of the Holy Wound, Mirror of Glory, Society of Saint Hydra. I mean, I instantly thought of Captain America then. I think it's because it's most recently been fried into my psyche. The Woolworth Club and so on.
So I'm a writer, but I'm also a mixologist, and I really like cocktails. And the thing is, you mix 3 things together, and you get magic. You mix 4 things together, and you get magic with layers. And every time I'm doing setting design, world design, I try to put a bunch of flavors in, so that when the time comes, when I think, okay, we've got the power of the lantern, who's the unmerciful, rational light that goes before and behind and illuminates the things you don't want to see and has to do with mirrors. Then when it comes to writing cult names, you got the ideas there in the cocktail or in the gumbo. You can reach in and say, okay, it makes sense for light to be to do with mirrors, and the glory is the mysterious light above the world and all the rest of it. So it's all about injecting the flavours at the beginning. And a lot of these flavours are stolen or inherited or an homage to existing inspirations or authors. And then, but you get this stuff in from the beginning, and you let the flavours mix together, and then you pull out something distinctive.
Okay, so when you get the achievement, the Dodo and the Dragon, what were you thinking then?
What was that about?
What was that about? Dodos don't exist, and neither do dragons. But the ways in which they don't exist are really important. And if you got the Dodo and the Dragon, congratulations.
I was going to say, not many people
That's not
do.
an easy one, yeah. This is one of these points where I try not to veer too far into pretentiousness, but a lot of the core lore of Cultist is about the ways in which things are real and things aren't. So ideas aren't real, but people really care about them. Dreams aren't real, but people really care about them. Bodies, minds, the Mansus, which is the place in dreams that you go, are all real in different ways. The histories, the different alternate histories in the world, all of which get braided together into one presence. Some of them are more real than others. At one point, one of the sort of named characters in the game, one of the most significant ones, gives the player a horn cup containing wine and says the wine is real, but the cup is the cup is real, but the wine is imaginary. And when you understand that, you understand the way this place works. So things are real, but things are real in different ways, and that's why you got the Dodo and the Dragon.
I thought it was more of a case of, well, man killed the Dodo, right? But the Dragon, a myth, a dream, a sort of a story made up, killed men. That's what I thought it was all about. Mythical killings versus actual killings. Which, that's what. So
you're not wrong. Those are ways in which they're different. And the fact that men killed the Dodo is, and I know some of our most dedicated lore hounds are going to be listening to this, so I have to be careful about what I say. But the fact that people killed the Dodo is immediately relevant to this. People killed dragons too, but they killed them in a different way.
Well, speaking of then, when you look at the game at the storefront on Steam and you see how all the cards and everything are laid out on the table, how would you explain to someone the mechanics of the game if you wanted to explain what they were seeing and how you play the game?
Well, that's a very good question. This was a real challenge to market it and to talk about it because, what is it? We kind of went for a variety of variations on a Lovecraftian narrative horror card game. That's catchy. Or maybe we should say it's a roguelike. That's important, but it's kind of a weird roguelike. And I got a lot of angry people on Reddit telling me that it definitely wasn't a roguelike.
Oh, yeah.
And I've not forgiven them.
It's not a roguelike according to the Berlin consensus, Lottie. Don't you know anything?
I have a lot of thoughts on the Berlin consensus, and when it comes round, I'll tell it. But yeah, I think we settled on a Lovecraftian card game because that's the simplest thing that tells people a lot, right? You see these cards, you're going to use them, but it's Lovecraftian. And then we lean very much into the fact that it's got one essentially very simple mechanic, which is you put cards in a hole with other cards and you make new cards. I mean, that's really the fundamental mechanic of the entire game. And I'm not underselling it here. That was a deliberate design choice. We wanted to have a deliberately simple mechanic so that the narrative could really sing. Alexis alluded to earlier, one of the key design principles of Cultist was uniting mechanics and narrative in a way that we haven't seen other games do. So if you think about a traditional RPG, you tend to get a bit of story, whether that's a cutscene or a lore dump or a big long bit of text to read, and then you go out and you do something. The verbs start happening. You start fighting, or you start playing your card game, or whatever it is that the mechanics of that game rely on, and then it stops again, and you tend to get more specific narrative beats, again, whether that's cutscene or chapter headings or whatever. And along the way, of course, you have, conversations and incidental narrative pieces here and there, whether that's finding, flavor text and items you pick up or gaining character stats or whatever. But it's not the same as the story really continuing along with the action. They are quite separate. And with Cultist, when you combine cards together, you not only advance the game mechanically, because you create new resources that allow you to make new recipes and do different things, which is exciting and mechanical progress, but you also advance the story. So you end up making decisions like, okay, well, which cultist am I going to send out on this mission? Because I want to particularly role play as this kind of character, so I'm going to send this person out. Or what ritual do I personally like using to summon a specific creature? Again, because you're making specific choices of what resources to use, and you're specifically telling an actual unique story to you. It's not just like, okay, you've got to the bit now where you use the single right to summon a single creature. It's very experimental. It's very wide-ranging. And even though it's as simple as putting cards in a hole to make new cards, there's a huge variety of ways that people end up dying horribly most of the time, but also possibly ascending and bringing the whole apocalypse and all that jazz.
To bring it down to some of the basics, the inspiration.
I've been too highfalutin, Governor.
Well, that's the thing. I feel praised and exalted. So to be more mechanical and basic about
that's on brand, isn't it?
I know. I like being praised and exalted. But it's Doodle Gods crossed with Arkham Horror, crossed with Civilization, crossed with a cookie clicker game. All of those things.
Yeah, cookie clicker was a really key inspiration that a lot of people don't recognise, and then as soon as you say it, they're like, oh.
A lot of people do as well. But Civilization, I think a lot of people don't recognise. But the big thing I took away from Civilization is the something happens in Cultist every 10 seconds. There's always multiple things going on, so there's always something about to happen. Just like in Civilization, there's every turn, there's another 3 things about to happen, so you stick with it a bit longer.
Not if you become friends with your pause key. My spacebar is my best friend in this game, because whenever something clicks off, I can't be bothered. I just press pause, I then do the actual recipe, then I unpause. That's how I do the game. Done, saves a whole lot of time, much easier, and the past sort of 10 minutes I think people need to be pointed at, because that will make a lot more sense to newcomers to the game just by listening to the past 10 minutes. That's what they need to listen to. Just cut the segment out, glue it to your Steam page, it'll make a lot more sense to people who were a bit lost, and unfortunately for me, I was completely baffled by the game itself. And as the intro says, experiment, have fun. I did. I realized it was a ticket chaser, that you had to basically construct certain recipes with the cards to then progress yourself through the game. And that's why my spacebar became my best friend, because I wanted the game to be extended and have a lot more time trying to figure these recipes out. And I did. So that lovely game. Love it.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, and you touched on 2 really important things there. So the one thing is the pause button. Like you say, if you want to be any good at the game, you need to become friends with the pause button.
You would not believe the significant percentage of players who did not see the pause button and then were like, "This is the most stressful game I have ever played."
And part of the point of it is I wanted people to feel stressed. I wanted people to feel that tension between trying to make art and trying to do life. So I wanted people to feel they're always running out of time, which is why one of the reasons it's real time, not turn based. But literally, people would again and again play through the whole game and don't realise there's a pause button until the second time through. And what we could have done is put a big flashing light on the pause button at the beginning, and then people would have realised at the beginning, but then they wouldn't have had the experience of being really fucking stressed, which is one of the things I wanted to inflict, I guess. But the other thing is the total lack of a tutorial. And I wanted to make a game without a tutorial, because the theme of Cultist is you're digging into the secrets under the world. You're trying to work out what the hell is going on. And I wanted the player's experience to mirror the character's experience. I wanted people to start out with sort of a basic understanding. You put the card in the slot and some money comes out, and you feed the money into time, and then you put the card in the slot again and you get more money, which is what we generally do with our lives. But then I wanted people to start experimenting and to find other things. Some people love that. Some people it really pisses off. Some people fall somewhere in between. And this is the power of making an experimental game. You do something unusual, like not put a tutorial in your game, and some people are just going to feel cheated or annoyed or frustrated. But for people who it connects with, it often really connects.
Looking at Steam, I see that you guys have got pretty much mostly positive reviews, and a lot of folks seem to really enjoy the game. I guess the question about that I would have is, what's some of the more memorable feedback you've gotten, whether it's positive or negative, and has that had, going forward, has it had you adjust anything in the game or towards the DLC, maybe add or remove anything?
So I'm really glad you asked that, actually. We have, I certainly have spent many happy hours tormenting non-British journalists and podcasters such as yourselves by describing it as a Marmite game. But I think you probably know what Marmite is.
I know what Marmite is. I love it. I love me some Bovril too.
Yes, my people. Okay, well, great.
Marmite's that black goo that people put on food.
So
it's not black goo, it's nectar from the gods.
You see. Anyway, so it's a very divisive game for people who don't understand how delicious it is on toast. And this goes back to something AK said earlier in the conversation, that it's better to have, in our opinion, a game that fires some people up, like it makes them really passionate and leaves a bunch of other people feeling cold, rather than kind of being lukewarm for everyone, because that doesn't help you at all. That doesn't help you stand out. So you're right that the majority of people who've played Cultist have liked it, thank God. But we have got a significant amount, more so than most games, I think, of people really not liking it.
I think we get people who don't get it, and we also get people who really love it, but see what we're trying to do, but it just pisses them off. So I can't pretend it's like a game that you either understand or you don't. Some people understand what it's trying to do; it still pisses them off. We did one of the first kind of reviews that don't get it was I loved. It was somebody who said, I don't understand this game. You put the card in the hole, things happen, and words happen, and then other words happen, and then time passes. And I tweeted this, and a bunch of people said, yeah, that would be my review, except it would be a positive review, not a negative review. That's the point of the game. And then I found that people started leaving word for word the same review on the Steam page. This things happen, words happen thing. But they were all choosing thumbs up in this sort of Iron Spartacus effect. So that's one thing. The people who nearly get it, that's not true. So the people who do get it and nearly love it, but lose sight of it. Often the very enraged reviews, and often there'll be like 59 hours playtime. I saw the other day on somebody who decided they
couldn't recommend it.
They couldn't recommend it. With very detailed and often really useful feedback. I read, although it's often very difficult, all the negative reviews, because a lot of people leave detailed feedback. And even though I ain't going to put a tutorial on the game, there are other ways in which I can make it easier or improve the design of the next game. And I learn a lot reading negative reviews.
But that was that guy who said that you should be tried for war crimes at The Hague.
Yeah, somebody left a review on God saying I should be tried in The Hague for crimes against humanity because of my approach to game design. It's hard to learn from that, honestly. I don't know what lesson I can take away out of this.
Just be less evil.
Don't go to The Hague.
Oh, but you asked how we have responded to that. And I think, you said that you read all the stuff, whatever it is. And of course, I'm involved in that too. So we are fully aware of the whole spectrum of feelings about it, which is great. There are some things that are intrinsic to the design. We want you to have to come to the game and connect the dots yourself and use your brain in a way that some games don't require you to use. And that isn't remotely an insult to those games. It's just a different style of gameplay. And if we change some things about the game, like adding a tutorial in, we're fundamentally setting up incorrect expectations in the player for the rest of the game. They will expect the game to explain itself and it won't. And then they'll feel frustrated and confused because the game is at odds with itself. So things like that no matter how many reviews we get saying, I hate this, we're probably not going to change, although we may reconsider it for future projects. But a lot of our work post-launch has been focusing on improving the user experience, because the one thing that I really learned in the immediate wake of launch was it's all well and good to have a game that requires you to connect the dots yourself and leave loads of really like clever, esoteric hints in the text. But the moment that the UI lets someone down, if the game expects them to connect the dots themselves, the person rightfully feels really cross immediately, and they feel like just throwing the game down. Because if you're not going to play fair and you're going to say, figure it out yourself, guys, but also there's a couple of mistakes that is going to mislead you, then people understandably feel like, well, I'm just going to wait until this game is fixed properly, because I really, really need to be able to rely on everything I see in the game if you are relying on me to figure it out myself.
And I'm really, in hindsight, I really regret launching the game without a auto-align option on cards.
Yeah, it looks so much nicer now.
Yeah, I didn't realise what a big deal it would be. I think, I'd have struggled to argue that we delay launch for it, but certainly I'd have struggled. I'd have made sure we dropped another feature to get it in. And quality of life stuff as well. I designed the game to be addictive if people got it, because you got this something keeps happening effect. But I didn't realise we'd have people racking up literally 100-hour playtimes.
I mean, one person, I think, actually forgot to eat for like a day.
So when you're doing, when I make an artistic decision to say you have to drag the card into the work verb over and over again because that's like going to work. So
someone says I have repetitive strain injury.
Yeah. then you reconsider. So we put autos in to make it a bit easier to do that. So there's this is the thing about Cultist Simulator, right? It's held over 100,000 copies now in 7 months, which is and our first. Our estimate for the first year was 20,000 copies.
It's 30, yeah, best estimate.
Best estimate was 30. So a lot more people have played it, and a lot of people have enjoyed it than we ever expected to. And that means that when I was doing my arty-farty goatee wearing black polo neck, this game's all a big art and you should enjoy the intention. I didn't realise there were going to be 5 times as many people playing it for 100-hour sessions. So it's forced me to adapt some of my preferences.
Right, as I said before, guys, if you want to know a bit more about the game and know how to play it, just listen to this podcast. Seriously, I think you guys need to point this section out, just this section, and I think it'll make a lot more sense to the people that didn't understand your method of conveyance. I think that's what probably confused them. The method of conveyance was a bit lacking, where they used to having AAA game companies basically hold their hand through a tutorial and then letting them loose on the world. Whereas you are like, no, none of that. You have to join the dots, and through that you will find your own fun. So that's what I took away from it. And I won't lie, for the first sort of half an hour, I was a bit frustrated because I didn't understand why the timers were ticking down. And some of the when you clicked on the card, the timer was within the text box of the actual card, so you couldn't really read it. Those are the things that frustrated me. But once you started getting and reading and understanding the game, it ticked over. Right, this card goes to that card goes there. This is what you study next. This is blah, blah, blah. And it became a lot of fun.
Well, cool. What was it Johnny Chinadini said? It was like a game where you're balancing out a microwave, and every time a microwave goes ping, you die of starvation.
Yes.
So that.
Well, I die because I keep running out of damn money, but never mind.
As in life.
So I see that this is listed for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Are you guys looking to possibly branch out? Is this something that you could see going to console at all, or like tablet OS?
So I'm just going to answer this because my co-founder here has a habit of saying whatever the hell he likes. And
virtual reality.
Announcing things. We are not making a virtual reality version of Cultist at this stage. We definitely do have plans to branch out onto different platforms. If people are interested in different platforms, they should stay tuned for the next month or so while we may be saying something. I would say that console, I think, is a really difficult platform for the games that we make. We obviously focus very much on text, so that's just a different relationship you have with your TV screen than you do when you're much closer to your monitor when you're playing on a PC game. And I have yet to see a text-based game like what we make do financially very well on console. But I'm a PlayStation player myself. I'm absolutely not against it. For us, it's always just basically a decision about the fact that there's only 2 of us. So what are we going to spend our very minimal resource on that will give us the best return. So unfortunately, we can't just say, yeah, let's get on everything. But theoretically, we'd love to.
What I can say is that...
oh, God.
No, don't worry. I'm not going to tell them about the partnership with the CIA.
Yeah, okay.
What I can say is I thought of this from the start as a game that would work potentially well on touch screens, because Fallen London, we had a hell of a time trying to bring to mobile. And
tool tips, don't use them.
Yeah, don't use tooltips for playing to move something to mobile. So that was baked in for the start, and whether it ends up on tablets or the Switch or whatever, it's much more feasible than bringing some of my previous work to other platforms.
Yeah, I can definitely understand what you're saying when you think of conventional consoles, or even phones, where maybe it might not work so well on there. But yeah, I kind of had, as much as Bamm doesn't like to agree or admit that the Switch is a console, that was kind of what I had in mind when I was asking about consoles.
Well, that is a much more applicable beast than Xbox or PlayStation, but we have nothing to say at this juncture.
Well, in my experience with talking to indie devs, it's a lot easier to port across to the Xbox system through Microsoft and Windows because they're just more inviting and more forgiving, whereas a PlayStation platform, there is a massive paywall. I'm not too sure on the Nintendo, but as Drac said, the Nintendo is a tablet and not a console, so it would suit the tablet market better. So I see this more on the tablety side of things.
Lottie's here with a fork, so I can't say anything with the fork.
So I want to shift gears a little bit then and go back slightly. After the Kickstarter, I was reading and I saw that you guys worked with Humble Bundle, and I'm a little curious to see if you guys could talk a little bit about what that experience was like, if you would recommend that to other indie devs.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Publishers are always the hot topic. I think in our experience, you just have to have a really clear idea of why you're signing with a publisher. Like, what do you want out of it? It's not enough just to say, oh, publishers are just kind of good, right? So if I sign with a publisher, I'll make Stardew Valley and then I'll live in a gold house. Like, obviously that's not how it works. And there are lots of horror stories of devs working with publishers and it really not going the way that they planned, particularly with things like IP. So we, again, wanted to do basically the easy thing because we have only 2 people in the studio and time is very much of the essence. So we spoke to a bunch of different publishers. I think we spoke seriously to about 3 or 4, but we got months into negotiations and discussions of actually what the relationship would look like. And we just like Humble. They are obviously a well-known brand. They are relatively new to publishing. The guy who we were speaking to, who's one of the big dogs, a guy named John Paulson, is a real straight up guy. He sounds like he might not like you on the phone, and then you meet him and he's like the friendliest guy in the world, which adds to his allure, I think. And obviously they give to charity and they're very indie focused. So we felt that their values were aligned with ours, which is basically to be a kind of chill, fun, open studio making weird indie games. And went with them. I think it was the right choice.
I think it was. There's some nuance in there. I mean, it's worth saying our experience with Humble was sufficiently positive that John made a point of introducing me to other indie devs who said, can I talk to an indie dev who's worked with you and like the experience? But I think the swing on the roundabout with Humble is this. They are, as Lottie said, newer to publishing.
Just going to get to that.
Do you want to
No, you go on.
So that means there's fewer established procedures, although that is already changing, and I know they're hiring now. But it also means they're more willing, I think, to listen to suggestions and direction from devs than some other studios would.
Yeah, so I think a key point of our experience with them is basically every time we asked for something, the answer was yes. And they were very, not that we had a problem with this because I'm a producer and this is a team of 2, but they would have been very lenient with deadlines. I know a bunch of their other publishers have missed deadlines and Humble are kind of cool with it because they understand and they want the game to be fun and creative. They're not somebody who's like, no, hit the milestone or we have a problem, which is wonderful for some indies. Like Alexis was saying, I think we went to them and said, this is how we want to play it. Can you do this for us? Can you do that? And the answer was almost always yes, which was fantastic. And we have this very positive relationship with them as a result, especially as we weren't taking the mick. But if, for example, a team of developers who were less experienced went to Humble and were expecting Humble to come to them with a sort of ready-made template of this is how we get your game to succeed, this is all the things you need to think about, I think those developers would have been disappointed because Humble didn't do that. Humble brought a bunch of experience that we didn't have, but they didn't sort of take control. And that's fine because we didn't want that. But I think you have to be very aware of what you do want, because there are so many different publishers with so many different models out there that it's not just get a publisher. It's get a publisher like Humble, get a publisher like Devolver, or get a publisher like Good Shepherd. Like there's so many different ways of doing it.
But the most important thing of all, as you may have noticed, we like transparency. I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. So we just published an absolutely gigantic blog post that is full of details people don't normally share. Everything from the details of the deal with Humble to our profit and loss statements for 2017 and 2018, which we put out there in the hope it would be interesting to gamers who don't often see how the sausage is made and useful to other indie devs. So if you Google Weather Factory or go to weatherfactory.biz, you'll find that post on our website.
I mean, but I guess the short version is that Humble have been good to us and we have a good relationship with them, and we chose to sign with them for a studio strategy rather than a game strategy. And by that, I mean, essentially our concern primarily was not how much money can we make from Cultist, but how many people can we make aware of Cultist and how many people can we reach.
I care about how much money we make from Cultist.
Sure, but
we care about the next game and the game after.
Exactly, because the whole thing was we were establishing ourselves as a developer. We didn't have like 7 games that everyone had heard of, so we could say proudly, Weather Factory, the developer of insert game here that you've all played and really like. So Humble was about amplifying our noise and reaching as many people as possible, and they came with like 12 million subscribers and massive social media presence and like gravitas, right? Humble said they were doing something and everyone knows Humble, they trust them, whereas like random Brits who you haven't heard of before say buy my game and everyone goes shut up. So for us, we're pleased we did it, but again the key thing is you need to know why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, you almost started to touch on a little bit of something else I wanted to ask, because I see that you guys already have one DLC out for Cultist Simulator. What future plans, like how many, some of the roadmap that I saw looked like, at least over the next couple of months, that there's going to be a couple more DLCs coming out, and how long will you continue to put out DLCs for Cultist Simulator, and then after that, what's next for you?
So you've done your homework. I'm very impressed. Good job.
Well, we have to. You guys are coming onto our show. I just hope you guys did some research on us. We're crazy beer swilling, bacon eating lovers here. We, as you've done your research, you will know, part of our Kickstarter pitch was something we call Perpetual Edition, which maybe you want to talk about. You look cute.
So the Perpetual, we did something similar with Summer Sea back when I was at Fail Better. The deal is if you bought the game before full release, then you're guaranteed all DLC free forever. And Summer Sea, after my departure, released a single but very large piece of DLC, so I think people got value on that. Cultist, we said if you buy the game, if you back the game at Kickstarter, or if you buy the game before launch, because for reasons you can read about on our blog, it was available for a short period before launch, but not all the way up to launch. If you buy before launch, you get all DLC free forever. And we can't. So I always saw it as something that would get updates after launch, both free and paid. And we've been supporting it since last May, so that's 7 months, and we'll be full time on it, more or less, until this April. And I feel like 3 pieces of DLC is the minimum that I can say. Yeah, you got something worth talking about from Perpetual Edition. So that's the minimum. But we've done a whole bunch of free updates to everyone. The game's literally doubled in size.
Yeah, it's now 110,000 words. And I was going to say, one of our key inspirations for it was Paradox, who have a famous or infamous system of DLC, depending on how you feel about them. And for people who don't know, they essentially release a great deal of paid-for DLC after releasing a significant game, but they also release it alongside free content updates. So the idea is, you buy a Paradox game now, you can basically guarantee that for the next year, possibly 2, 3, 5 years, the game will keep evolving and there'll keep being more stuff to play. And oh look, over here, if you want to buy £5, this new add-on that they've just released, fantastic. And this is good for you as a player, because a game that you enjoy that has been made well has a very long shelf life and loads of content, and it keeps you engaged. And it's great for Paradox because it means they can sell you a game for 30 quid, but then you get £400 by the end of that player's experience with your game because you release so much stuff for it.
But the couple of ways in which so one way which this fell down and one way in which we couldn't do it. The way it fell down was just releasing free DLC and paid DLC at the same time for a 2-player team. It's really complicated. So not just, all our DLC was always going to be like a tenth the size that the Paradox DLC is because our budgets are a tenth or less of the size. But trying to organise the mechanics of this bit of content which everyone is going to have and this bit of content which only some people are going to have while supporting saves so that people's saves aren't broken from one version to another makes my eyes bleed. So what we ended up doing was, we did release one major free update and a piece of DLC at the same time, but we've switched to doing, a free update and then the next bit will be a DLC and probably the next bit will be a DLC if we do a free update after that, but rather than trying to do it at the same time. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just unlike Paradox, we're not a whole department. And after 2 years on Cultist, I want to do something else. So after April, we won't be abandoning Cultist. For a start, we'll be doing more with the universe. And I want to do some cross-game stuff between Cultist and future games. But we won't be full-time on Cultist anymore. So I don't think we'll stop necessarily at 3 pieces of DLC, but 3 pieces of DLC is the minimum.
Just a topic I want to address. I know Lottie has said Lovecraftian quite a few times, and I didn't necessarily get that sort of vibe. I got more of an Aldrich sort of vibe, but that's just me. Somewhat similar in approach, but very different outcomes.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Lovecraft means a lot of different things to different people. I think most commonly, Lovecraftian tends to mean specifically set in the world that Lovecraft made. So specific references to the old ones and Cthulhu and all that stuff. And you're right, that's not what Cultist is at all. Cultist is an original world that AK devised from his writerly mind.
At one point, very, very early on in development, I was thinking about actually doing a Mythos game using the same mechanics, but it was just more fun to write all the stuff because I enjoy doing that. And
I think the way that we mean it is, I'm going to sound like such a wanker, but kind of from a literary point of view, like how would you describe the writings of H.P. Lovecraft? What is specific to the way that he writes and the way that he tells stories? And again, that goes back to the things like leaving space for the reader to be afraid of their own mind and everything being in the periphery rather than up in front of you. So yeah, that's what we mean. But you're right that it for some people it is a little bit of a surprise.
The way he built his world and the way he managed to bring them down upon you was, or rather say is, because people are still experiencing it, is quite scary.
The way Lovecraft did it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they haunt me. I love it. He wrote a lot of short stories. So like every short story writer, I think some are arguably better than others. And of course, there are some slight issues with his personal philosophy. But yeah, I'm a big sort of defender of his. Like, I think he's a very odd, very brilliant man at one particular thing, in the same way that, Arthur Conan Doyle was really great at writing Sherlock Holmes stories, but give him a novel of epic proportions and it all falls to pieces. But yeah, I love him.
Yeah, sorry, just to bring it right back to the beginning. I wanted to ask these questions, but we just speared off in all sorts of directions, and I didn't really have time to sort of ask the questions that I had on my docket. Drax asked all his. I've got one more. People that listen to this podcast or the show for the first time, tuned in, whatever have you, and they want to go and experience Cultist Simulator for themselves. Where can they find information about the game? Where can they buy the game? Where can they get in contact with you? How they can go ahead and watch your YouTube channel, because you guys have got a few videos about how the game's built on there, so on and so forth.
So we're the factory. We live at wherethefactory.biz because I'm a bozo and I didn't think to check whether wherethefactory.com was available before registering the company name. Might be the last time I make that mistake. Both of us are on Twitter. We're very active on Twitter and quite chatty on there. At Alexis Kennedy and at Tron Bevan. Cultist is there's a bunch of stuff about it on our website. It's on Steam, it's on GOG, it's on Itch, it's on Humble, and in terms of videos, I think I want to recommend System Chalk, who was one of the first streamers to come across our stuff. He was a very mellifluous Canadian voice and a very calm approach to taking people through some of the intricacies of Cultist Simulator. So there's a bunch of good streams out there of the game. I think it meshes well with a certain kind of chilled streamer, but System Short, Norman was one of the first, and I think one of the most watchable.
Well, and on our YouTube channel, there's all of your design.
Oh yes, the design streams. Yes, yeah, I have done that. Yeah, so we do monthly design streams where I talk about the inspirations behind it and the design methodology and a bunch of other stuff, and drink gin and talk nonsense.
Reddit, Discord, and Instagram as well, boys and girls. The Discord, there will be a link in the description below. Instagram is Weather Factory, and obviously Reddit is obviously r-Weather Factory. Simple, short, and sweet.
Yes, thank you. I should really mention both of those things.
No, we did do some internet hunting. We tend to do that with people, and we're a bit of stalkerish sort of hunting. But we found all the details. Happy days.
I think it's worth saying that our community is really nice, particularly because I think people like sharing the knowledge of how to get ahead in the game, and are very, very helpful. Yeah. And the Discord is particularly lively and friendly.
Drac.
Well, before we get to what Dan likes to call the penultimate question, I had one that's a little bit off the wall. Just looking at the design of some of these cards and some of the artwork and stuff that I've seen, and the popularity of different tabletop games on Kickstarter, have you guys considered maybe turning this into an actual card game, or would it even work?
So that's a great question. A lot of people have said that because obviously it looks like a tabletop game, and I think the moment that you start thinking about the practicality, it's really frightening. So how, for example, would you emulate all the timers that you have once you've unlocked all the timers in a mid-game session? Would that be, like egg timers that the player has to turn over at certain points? Would that be like an electronic board? Would you change the design significantly enough that you didn't need all of that stuff? It's not actually as simple as it sounds.
The really big thing is finding the recipes and how you do that. You probably need to
what cards would go with what cards.
But we like the idea in principle, and you could take the assets and the setting and some of the mechanics and put them into something else. But I don't have any board game experience, so we'd need to work with a partner. We had a couple of preliminary discussions with a couple of people, but I think the proposition is sufficiently weird that they weren't entranced by it. So yeah, someday maybe, but we'd
if you're
want the right
listening to
partner.
this and you have loads of money and you know how to make board games, hit us up.
Or if you're a small board game studio with a good record, then do hit us up, because a small partner is somebody we'd happily go with.
Well, sweet. I would love to keep talking to you guys. This has been so much fun, but I know we're kind of over the hour here, so I'm going to leave it to Bam to ask his favorite question that we ask each of our guests.
Drac, you know the contract that you and G both signed. Under reference to Article C, subsection 3, pen and asterisk number 3, right? When G is not available, you have to ask this question. So please, sir, by all means, ask this question.
I can see Bam's not going to step up to the plate, so I will. All right, so something we like to ask each of our guests, just kind of a fun thing to throw out there. It has nothing to do with anything we've talked about thus far. But what kind of bacon do you like? How would you like it prepared? And what kind of beverage, be it beer, cider, etc., that you would pair with said bacon?
In the words of Agent Dale Cooper in the Great Northern Hotel in Twin Peaks, super crispy, almost cremated. I don't think it's possible to make bacon too crispy. So
I think that's a very important distinction that you've got wrong there. I think crispy bacon is absolutely the correct form of bacon, but it can't be carbonated. I don't want it black.
Carbonated?
I definitely don't want it carbonated.
You make the best bacon.
Thank you very much. I was angling for that compliment.
It's really very good.
And then the beverage is bacon. I mean, we're Brits, so for me, it's got to be tea.
Well, my real breakfast pleasure is so I'm a coffee man, so it's a good Americano with fresh orange juice and with a bacon sandwich. Yeah, that's
classic.
Yeah,
timeless.
Bacon butty breakfast. Oh yeah, can't go wrong there. Great start to the morning. I can see why you guys have made such a great game. Bacon fueled game developing. Yes.
It's the secret.
Is this the part, Bam, where you ask them to slide in a card that has some kind of bacon on it in one of their upcoming DLCs?
No, I don't think a bacon slice would fit in this game at all. It's too dark, mysterious, and see, when it comes to recipe making, where in this game would a slice of bacon fit? No, you can't do that.
I can think of so many places. That's a problem with this game. There are so many horrific instances where you could mention bacon and it would be the most gross, upsetting thing.
I mean,
Death
bacon
by
is basically
bacon.
meat carved off a living thing and then made hot until the water goes out of it, isn't it? So.
Well, you heard it here first, bacon cod.
Well, like I said, it has been absolutely lovely having you guys on. I've really enjoyed the chat. And, for myself, I'm going to get out of here.
Right, guys, thank you very much for listening. This was the Bamster Show. You guys heard the voices of Lottie and Alexis from the Cultist Simulator and made by Weather Factory. I got that completely backwards, but never you mind. My name is Bam Havoc. Love you guys there. Toodle pip.